Good evening. Welcome. I'm Megan, a bookseller at Literati Bookstore. We're pleased to welcome Joseph Fink and Meg Bashwiner at our At Home with Literati series in support of the first 10 years. They will be in conversation with Carrie Elkin and Danny Schmidt. Just a quick webinar overview for attendees. The chat is closed, but you may want to keep the chat window open during the event, as I'll be dropping links to purchase the first 10 years in Literati throughout the event. You can also use the Q&A feature on your toolbar to submit questions at any time, and I'll ask a selection at the conclusion of their conversation. A reminder, you can also shop for more books at literatibookstore.com for curbside pickup, or have it shipped to your home anywhere in the United States. In lieu of book purchase, we'd also ask that you consider a $5 donation to sustain our virtual programming, whether you'd like to think of this as this week's or this month's or this year's subscription to our programming. You can make donations at literatibookstore.com/donation. Otherwise, we simply thank you for your attendance this evening or this morning or this afternoon, depending on where and when in the world you may be joining us. And now let me introduce tonight's authors and our moderators. Joseph Fink is the creator of the Welcome to Night Vale and Alice Isn't Dead podcast, and the New York Times bestselling author of Welcome to Night Vale, It Devours, and The Faceless Old Woman Secretly Lives in Your Home, all written with Jeffrey Craner. And Alice, he is also the author of the middle grade novel, Halloween Moon. He and his wife, Meg Bashwiner, have written the memoir, The First 10 Years. They lived together in the Hudson River Valley. Meg Bashwiner is a writer, performer, producer, and tour manager. She lives in the Hudson River Valley in Los Angeles. Danny Schmidt and Carrie Elkin are each solo singer-songwriters from Austin, Texas, who also happen to be married partners, and then who also happen to have grown into collaborative artistic partners, which make them perfectly suited to facilitate a conversation with Meg and Joseph about the recent memoir, The First 10 Years. Danny and Carrie have each been the featured weather musical guests in various episodes of Welcome to Night Vale, and have toured with the cast for several of their live shows, have gotten to watch and admire the evolution of Meg and Joseph's relationship firsthand.
All right. Thank you, Megan.
Hi,
Thank
guys.
you to Literati for hosting.
Oh,
Hey, Megan, Joseph.
Hello.
we can pretend that we weren't just talking for 15 minutes
I
before
know.
this.
Is this what it takes to chat with you guys? Is to set up a whole event and invite people? Because it's good to catch up with you guys.
Yeah, this is how we've been hanging out with our friends this month, is just be like, hey, could you moderate our book event? You know us. It won't be weird.
I like it.
Well, we were delighted when you invited us. It's always good to see your faces. We loved the book. We kind of read it the way you guys wrote it, which was individually without comparing notes, and then compared notes at the end. And we both really loved it on a lot of different levels, personal levels, and just as lovers of literature and stuff. So we were delighted to chat with you about it. So thank you for having us.
Yeah.
Thank you for reading it.
We thought a good way to start, just in case everyone wasn't already familiar with the kind of unique format of the way that you chose to write this book and tell this story, we thought you could just kind of introduce the overview of and the process.
Sure. So it's the first 10 years of our relationship told year by year. And we each wrote it entirely separately without consulting each other than we kind of would generally be like, this is sort of what I'm thinking for this year, just so we weren't writing the exact same thing. We didn't want to like them to be too repetitious. It's an idea I had a few years ago. I think definitely Carrie, Danny, I don't remember if you were there. You were one of the first people I told about this idea like years ago. I was like, I have this idea for a book, and this is what it is. So it's one that was around for a while. Before we actually hit 10 years even.
Yeah. It was Joseph's idea, and he came to me with it, and I was like, sure, sounds great. And then we started writing it, and it has been fun. It was fun. It was a good time. And
No stress involved in the writing of this book.
It was stressful for me because it's my first book. I've written a bunch before. I've written a ton of short plays and monologues sort of ad nauseum for the past 10 years. But I've never written anything that's a book. So this was, I had something I had always wanted to do, and something I'd always hoped I'd get to do would be to write essays. So this project happening was a really great way for it to be your first book because you're writing it with someone you trust. Also, you only have to write half of it, and
That's
structure is
awesome.
filled out for you. So the structure with the existing structure there, it's not like we start from scratch, being like, well, how do we tell the story of our lives? It's like, okay, this is the right to this assignment every chapter, and then within that, there's room for other fun structure-y things that we do. But the basic structure is already there. So it's kind of just putting the clothing on the mannequin, not having to invent the body.
Yeah, that's a good way to say it.
Right. Oh, sorry.
Oh no, you're good.
Did you?
We were
We
having
need
this.
to have a little buzzer for ourselves.
We have like a buzzer, a fake buzzer in front of us for when the other one gets to chat. I was thinking what a good exercise it would be for every couple to do what you did.
Yeah.
Like what an amazing, I was like, they should create a workbook and we can all do our own versions of what it would look like. Yours were it was just so fun to read because so much of it was like you actually remembered things in the same way. I was kind of imagining us doing it and how it would be like a book that would be completely we would have totally different recollections of most moments and we're still married. So
yeah, I think it really kind of speaks to the what your relationship is. If you're the kind of couple that's going to fight about who said that, how did you say that, then it's maybe not the task for you. Or if you're trying to get better at that. But
yes,
I think it's really nice as a couple, you guys, when you've been together a really long time, to sort of take a moment either, once a week or once a year to just be like, what did we do this year? What did we get into?
So good.
So it is kind of a nice exercise in relationships, especially in long-term relationships, because time is passing, to take the time and remember together what you did. And because at the end of your life, you want to be able to remember what you did, at least.
Right.
Yeah, it's hard to know what the unit of revisiting should be. I guess we have our annual anniversary, so that's a pretty natural yearly. Some years are so full of events that you could have 12 looking backs in 1 year, and then sometimes you're kind of in the same chapter for 3 years.
Yeah,
that's what touring is.
The touring the same day all day for 6 months until you're off the tour.
Yeah.
It was interesting for me because I'm extremely not a journaler. I just don't write down anything about my life really, unless it's for a specific project. I remember early on in Night Vale touring, my friend Glenn bought me a Moleskin and was like, you need to be writing all this down. And I did it for a page and then lost interest. And so it was interesting to kind of, almost certainly I would have remembered this all better if I had been journaling this whole time. But
at least a captain's log that just kind of got the key things that could trigger the rest. It sounds like you use social media a little bit to go back and be your
yeah, I mean, I have social media. I also it's sort of terrifying, but I also sort of like being able to do it. So I leave it on, but I have the Google timeline where I literally, my phone tracks everywhere I am every single day. And so I can be like, where was I on May 17th, 2015? And Google is like, here's everywhere you went. You walked for a half mile over to here. And then you can, and so that helps a lot for just obviously the details of the day aren't there, but just being where even were we that month?
Yeah.
And you can kind of see, and it starts to fill in. It kind of serves that same purpose of just giving your brain something to jump back to. I mean, it's terrifying and an invasion of privacy, but I do kind of like it.
I mean, at least it's using that data for yourself. You're choosing to use that data for something meaningful for yourself.
Right. They're using it anyway, so why not at least you can have access to it. And then for me with the touring stuff, I don't keep a journal of tour, but I do a performance report every night. So every night we know all the events of the day, how the show went, how the travel went, who was on the tour with us. So that all exists for every show we've done since 2015. So
has anyone ever gone back and looked at those?
I have, because I use them sometimes when planning new stuff, being like, okay, what did I when we played this venue? Was it okay? Do I make any specific notes, or if we're working with the same promoter rep or whatever, I'm like, was this person cool last time? And then sometimes, you know, I tried to be very detailed with it, mostly because I think when you're writing a report, it's always, people will read it if they're funny and they are well detailed. So there's that aspect of it, is that they are detailed to get people to read them. But yeah, so
it's a good sense of closure at the end of a night too, because it's like a day of chaos and a night of revelry and chaos, and then to tie a little bow on it at the end of like, okay, this is what happened today, done.
Yeah.
And then the people back home, because when Joseph and I stopped touring together all the time, and I was always on the road, and he would come sometimes as much as he could, so he would get to have like a little log of how my day went.
Yeah, it was definitely nice. The performance reports and also the day sheets that became, we eventually had the like app that Meg would insert comments about what we were doing that day. And it did help me feel a little close to her when I was in like Los Angeles and she was in Finland, which is a geographical distance that actually happened once, and it's really weird being that far away from your partner. Like you are about as far away as it is possible to be before you start coming closer again.
Yeah.
It's when you could drill a hole and get there faster than going around.
Yeah.
It was interesting to me, and I'm curious actually if this is your same perception of it, but it seemed like early in the book, your points of interest that you both kind of chose as the touchstones throughout the year were kind of more aligned with one another. And as it got closer to the present, the way you wrote about the year, like what the important moments of that year seemed to diverge more from each other. And I had various thoughts about it, but I'm curious if that even seems true to you, and why that might have been.
Yeah, it definitely seems true to me. I think the reason that it is that way is because we wrote all of these in 2019. So our memories of those, like when we look back at, you look back at 10 years ago, and you're like, okay, what was the big thing? As opposed to when I look back at 2016, I can be like, okay, I remember this specific month. I remember this, this trip to a hair salon, that sort of stuff that is more finer points. So we have more to choose from. Whereas it's like, 2009, we met, we started dating, we both kind of found our feet in New York City. So it's there's definitely broader strokes from stuff that's further away from us. And then there's more details just because they're fresher in our memories.
Yeah.
Do you think if you'd written the book 10 years from now about the first 10 years, like 2019 would have been with that amount of perspective?
I mean, one major difference is, so we wrote all of this, we finished this book in like January 2020. So this was all written before COVID. So I do think there's like, I don't know, if we were writing this 10 years from now, I don't know if what was about to happen to us as soon as these 10 years are up would have affect how we told this story. It's funny because now I think none of us want stories about the pandemic. We're all desperate for anything else. But I remember early on in the pandemic, I was so anxious about this book because I'm like, no one's going to care about it because it's not about COVID. Like no one's going to like, it's going to feel so irrelevant because for some reason I thought everyone was just only going to want to read about what was going on.
It's such a relief that it's not about that.
Yes.
That, and though my first question that I had, not on the list, but like in my head when I was getting to it, was like, I wanted the first 11 years, and I wanted to, because at this point, by the time it ends, we're woven into the fabric of the way you guys are woven in together as you then approach the most momentous year in probably of our lifetimes. Plus you're pregnant, not to spoiler alert here. It's all throughout the book, and a baby's coming. So you're going through the process of preparing yourselves for parenthood while going through COVID, while going through this kind of political madness and stuff. And not that I wanted to hear the telling of those things, but the telling of your relationship now that we're invested in y'all as you get into it and hear how that affected you.
That's
That's
great.
what sequels are for.
Yes, that's what. Yeah, the next 10 years.
The next 10 years.
Which we do want to write. I think it does kind of leave us at a pretty good time, because it really does feel like a big dividing line between 2019 and the rest of our lives.
Totally.
So it is kind of, I think, a kind of a natural pause point. And I think when we would love to write a second book in the next 10 years about this. And our plan for it is to actually write it in real time. So for 2020, we both have drafts of a 2020 chapter.
Some of it.
We have enough. We have enough for us to say.
Some notes.
She can totally see you.
But so we have.
I have a bullet point list of possible things.
That's
I have
great.
something that I wrote that I will adapt for this. So the plan is to actually try to write it in real time, or as close to real time as possible, so that it does have a bit of a time capsule element, as opposed to this one, which is more of a looking back on.
Yeah, I
That's
love that
great.
idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, because one of the things I was thinking about throughout the book is how much, when we look at our history, there's this inevitability to it. We know how things turn out. And so writing about it from the end, looking back, has a different sense. Like, we mostly live in mystery and uncertainty. And you guys made a lot of hard decisions. You guys both pursued a challenging artistic life that doesn't have an obvious commercial avenue, and managed to make it work. But that meant persevering through like tons of uncertainty. But writing it from the end makes those uncertainties seem certain, I would love to hear it told in real time too.
Yeah, to see it, to see it kind of work backwards into itself. Yeah.
I mean, they're both these 10 years, given what's about to happen, is going to be the story of us kind of embarking on a thing that we're sort of in our heads over, and then we figure out as we go.
I think the last show I played was when I was 38 weeks pregnant. So I'm just with you right now.
I can't believe you weren't still touring at 38 weeks.
I wasn't touring, but I played a show that was about an hour away from Austin. And I can remember, like, it's so fun. I imagine it being like the writing of this book, because you remember, like you were talking about the broad strokes, you remember high points and low points, right? And then like the in-between is just like, like white noise in the middle. I can remember like what I was wearing that night, because I was so like, am I going to give birth? Like on this stage? What am I doing?
I just remember
Well, that's when you get towards the end of it, you're like,
I know, I was just like,
is it today? Like,
it was so, yeah. Danny was on tour, like, I think until I was 33 weeks pregnant or 34 weeks pregnant, and being like, oh my gosh, am I, like, it's just, you feel like you could, because you could have the baby at any moment. Anyway, back on track, but I was just thinking of
you came on tour with us when you were, you were early in your mid-second trimester, and I was like, this chick is tough. And then I did not realize how tough you were until I was at that point in my pregnancy. And I was like, how did she do this? How was she
thanks.
That was a hard schedule too. Like, we had shows and travel every day. And
I think if that had not been my life, like for the 10 or whatever, 12, 15 years prior to that, it probably would have felt different.
Theater people are miraculous caregivers too. Something about that community that just wants to.
Yeah, I felt so cared for by all of you. You were like, you don't have to drive.
Well, like, we were just like, we just need you to sing every night if that's cool. And you did.
It was so fun. We also went on the bourbon like trail ride thing. I was like, it's cool.
We went on a bourbon tour where we went to, it was like 10 different bourbon bars. And you were like, you're like, I'll have the seltzer with the mint in it, please. And we're all like, but the first one, it's like, oh, this is so fun. By the time it's like the third bar, we're all very wasted. And you're very much like, I'll have another seltzer. This conversation is starting to be less making sensey for anyone besides me.
Oh, yes.
She was like the tour nanny at that point.
Yeah. I loved it. Anyway.
Can I ask a process question?
You can
Did
ask
you have
so many questions.
I have a lot
the
of process.
process.
I have a lot of process questions about it. Just one, just a little practical one. Did you write a year / chapter? I know you didn't read each other's, but did you write them at the same time and then visit those and then go to write the next chapter, or did you write your whole 10 years and then share them with each other?
It was kind of piecemeal. Like we shared them with each other before sending them to the editor, and we sent them to the editor in batches. So it was basically like we'd write a batch, read each other's, and then send those in.
It's not like in the same week you're both living in 2011 land in your head, and
Sometimes, because I also did a little skipping around. I think I don't quite remember, but I think I wrote the 10 years out of order. Because there was just ones I had clearer ideas about what I wanted to talk about. So it's extremely likely we were not always on the same year.
I wrote them in order. I thought that was important for my process because I wanted them to be able to speak to each other. And yeah, that's hard to sort of reverse engineer, at least for me, from the jump. So I was like, I had originally thought that I might jump around a little bit, but I was like, no, do it in order so that you can create an evolution and an arc and a
Right.
It's not hard. Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to do after the fact as opposed to just trying to do it in the
Right.
Let the themes emerge rather than have some theme of because there are themes that stay with you guys obviously through all 10 years and stuff. You're touching them in different ways as the relationship changes.
Yeah.
That was one of my process questions.
I want to, well, we can keep on process. I was like thinking a lot about just my emotional connection with the book and how I felt about, it was so interesting reading it because I feel like our lives have some similarities in them. I don't know, Meg, I like think I operate on a baseline of a pretty joyful human. And I think both of us, well, we know that we both married Jewish men and we both married anxious Jewish men. And
is there any other kind?
Is there, right. Like it's such an interesting reading it. I was hysterically laughing and also crying my eyes out at the same time. Just like imagining everyone's sort of pain during like all of your 10 years of dealing with anxiety and also dealing with your own personal body, food issues, and which also happens to be something that I feel like I deal with in the Jewish family a lot with Danny's mom maybe, and like just being a part of that world of someone that has struggled with that. And then also our touring lives. And then also I got to the chapter, Joseph, about your dad. And I feel like a similar, like, I just felt so connected to the way that you spoke about that. And I don't even know if I have a question. I don't even have a question. I just wanted you both to know how beautiful a read the book was and how connected I felt to both of you. Because I feel like our lives are just obviously not the same, but there's so many similarities that that drew me in and just felt personal and emotional. And I really appreciated that. And I mean, I think it's why I've felt close to you both all along, but
yeah, we're definitely kindred spirits, the four of us. And it's nice that that you did find connection to both of us in it. I think that's kind of the hope with memoir and sharing stories, is that I really do feel like everyone has a story worth telling if they tell it honestly, and that we, while we are, we come from different places and have different things, there's a lot of stuff that is true and kind of universal about the human experience, or at least how we relate to our own human experience. So I think that is sort of the purpose of memoir, is to sometimes see yourself in it, but also not to see yourself in it, just to see what someone else's story is and sort of connect to the telling of it.
Yeah, it was great.
Yeah.
You did an amazing job.
Thanks.
Well, and that's
Yeah.
kind of a theme in all of y'all's work.
Yeah,
Previous
that's
to
true.
like the neo-futurist stuff. If there's one kind of central takeaway for me from reading about your time with them, is that it seems like vulnerability is kind of the central tenet. It's kind of like just tear yourself open, not just tear yourself open, then put yourself on stage in front of people to see what's there. And that was one of my questions about this book. Was it's really brave to not just even though Joseph's done other books too, none of them have been nonfiction or memoir, like really talking in the first person about yourself, not hiding it into a character or something. And then to have your partner telling the same story where you're not even in control of it.
Right.
That, how did you approach the anxiety around the vulnerability part?
Also, were there rules and topics to avoid? I feel like those questions go into one place.
There was no topics to avoid. I don't know. I wasn't nervous about it, really. I think to go back to something like Meg said towards the beginning about, I feel like this is a project that seemed good to me because we had a relationship that was strong enough to withstand the scrutiny. And so I just wasn't that, I don't know. I wasn't that worried about it. And in terms of, putting personal detail, I mean, it's interesting because I don't love standing in front of my work. I've joked before that if I had thought it through, I would have hired an actor to play me on book tours, like on the first book tour, so I could just never have to do any of them. But with this, I have such, it's a story I'm telling. Ultimately, I'm the one deciding how much information is getting out, and I trust Meg on her side. So I don't. It is us. It is vulnerable, but at the same time, it's us crafting it. It's us deciding what you get to know and what you don't.
Yeah, that is the thing. It's yes, it's very honest, but that's just the school of storytelling that I learned how to write in. So that's kind of the only way I know is that you got to be honest. But again, you're in control of it. You're the cinematographer. So, but
you're not. You guys. I mean, you trusted the other person in control of it a lot, right. But ultimately, that's a lot of trust.
But also, I'm fond of artistic games. I think they come up with interesting results to set a boundary and see what happens when you just follow those steps. And so I trusted us and I trusted the game because I knew that anything that clashed or disagreed was the work succeeding, not failing. Like that was the point. Did
that trigger conversations with you guys of unexplored areas when you realized there were discrepancies between your viewpoints about things?
Oh, totally. Yeah. But I think at first mine was like, well, that's wrong and I can prove it. Here's X, Y, and Z. And then I think I eventually let go of that and was like, no, this is the game, play the game. The game is that it's his memory and my memory, and that's the construct. We're not trying to, this isn't a captain's log. This is a memoir. This is, personal storytelling, and it's gonna, there's a fingerprint to that. So I can't put mine on his and he can't put his on mine with this still working within the parameters. Although if there was, this didn't happen, but I feel like if there was something that he wrote where I was like, I do not want people to know this can't happen, he definitely would have taken it out. I would have done the same. So
we read it before even submitting it to the editors. So if there was something that was a hard line, that would have been respected. But
were there any things that you were close to that line on?
No, I don't think so.
I don't think so. I think because at this point we know each other. Maybe if were writing them in real time at the time, we might not. But because we know each other really well, we know each other, what we're sensitive about, and what moments of our life, or maybe we don't want to talk about in an artistic way, or we're not ready to talk about it in an artistic way because we don't want this to be therapy. We want this to be art. We want this to can be distilled through the lens of craft and purpose and all of that stuff, and not just this is all the really hard shit that we've been through. Let's just write that down. Or this is all the really fun shit that we've been through. So
did you ever think about, oh my God, my mom is going to read this?
Oh, more of his mom is going to read this. Which is, I
Right.
mean, our moms are great. And I feel like we have really good relationships with our families, and we're very open about that. It's not necessarily our moms, but like everyone. So like acquaintances, aunts, uncles, former people in our lives, future people in our lives. It's
kind of liberating though too.
Yeah, I'd imagine.
I'm sort of supposed to be the anxious one, but I'll be honest here that I really was not that or at all nervous about it, to be honest. Like Meg was feeling pretty anxious about it, but I don't know, like they're the ones choosing to read it. If I leave my diary open, you decide to read it, that's on you. So
Right.
yeah, I don't know. I think I've kind of always been this way when it comes to within the boundaries of art. Because I remember I don't remember what the song was, but I remember when I just moved to New York and I was like 22 or whatever, I did a cover, just kind of like experimenting with recording techniques and trying to figure out guitar stuff. And I did a cover of a song that had fairly sexual lyrics, and I shared it with my dad because he was a professional musician. I just wanted his opinion on the recording and the guitar playing. And my sister heard it and was like, you sent this to Dad? And I'm like, yeah, I don't know. It's just, I wanted to know what he thought of the recording. It just didn't, I don't know. I just not that squeamish if it's within the boundaries of work I'm doing, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, ultimately, we're all human beings. It's nice. That's why it's refreshing. That's why we're drawn to people that make themselves vulnerable, because they're the ones willing to show their humanity.
Yeah. I mean, when I handed the book to his mom, it was like, the jig is up. I'm pregnant. Like,
and we all know how this happened.
yeah.
Yeah.
So there is that aspect of it. And then also, again, the neo-futurist thing kind of wears down your edges. Because the way that show works is that you have to make work so quickly because it's a weekly show that you kind of really don't have time to care. You're mostly just looking for content. Like you're like, I'm out in this material, so I will, I don't have time to be like very precious about sharing the thing. But what I have time to be precious about is whether it's good, whether it entertains. And so, and my family would come to see the show, friends would come to see the show, lots of strangers would come to see the show. Definitely a smaller audience than that of a book that is released wide. So,
right. Well, still though.
Yeah.
And you can't say, oh, you heard that wrong. No, it's there on the page. They can go check it out.
Yeah, they can reread. Whereas when I'm performing it live, it's like, did she say that? Was that her, or was it the other girl who looks like her? No, okay.
Maybe she was just acting at that moment.
Yeah, so it's improv. She's just improving.
Yeah.
Joseph, I was thinking about if I'm remembering correctly, which I am a person that has horrible reading comprehension, I'm like, I loved that book. And then I'm like, I don't even know what I loved, except I'm so emotionally connected. But I feel you started writing snippets for Night Vale right after your dad died. Is that correct?
It was about 6-7 months later. Yeah. So he died in July. I got laid off from the job I'd had for a few years in January.
The debit card job?
The prepaid debit card. Yep. Partly because after my dad died, I think I stopped even pretending to give a shit at that job.
Right.
And then the company was not doing well. So they couldn't really afford to keep me anyway. So I suddenly was unemployed, and my dad had just died, and I was sort of at loose ends. And that's when I started writing these like weird paragraphs about a desert town.
Did you feel, I mean, we never know, right? As writers of any kind, what's going to become of anything. But were you even thinking about that at the time?
I mean, I was looking for something to work on with Jeffrey because we had just finished writing a show together. I'd been working with him for like over a year on the show, and then it ended right after my dad died, actually. Like my dad died and then we did the show. And so I was looking for something to work with him, and yeah, it felt good. And then I remember before I even sent it to Jeffrey, I made the first episode. I got Cecil and I asked John if I could use his music, and I put together the pilot episode as you heard it is. I never improved it at all. It's exactly the test episode I showed to Jeffrey, being like, "Do you want to make this thing?" And I do remember walking around Williamsburg at like sunset after I had finished making that first episode, just listening to it on repeat.
Right.
And just being like, this does feel really good. Like, I don't know. I definitely wasn't like, this is my ticket to being able to be a writer full time. But it did feel very good. It felt better than really anything I had made before.
Yeah, you did say to me, you're like, I think this could be a thing. And
Right.
Turns out.
I
it was
know.
right. It's a thing.
That'd be a fun podcast actually, to go talk to people with hits and ask them how they felt about their hit relative to like any number of other works that they've done.
Yeah, that would be good.
From my experience, people are usually caught off guard by what found big success for them.
I mean, when I said I think this could be a thing, I don't think I was even remotely thinking of what it would become. I think it was more like, some people might listen to this.
We might just make this thing, Jeffrey and I might like spend some time making this thing not like this is going to be, because this was kind of before there was a thing as like the viral podcast,
Right.
Some popular podcasts out there, but it was not something that like had a bunch of live shows and a bunch of books and like a huge catalog of episodes and actors and all of the different things that we've done with it. Which this is kind of like a little woo-woo, but I feel like sometimes when you meet someone who's going to be a part of your life for a while, or when you are, you go to a place you've never been before, you can feel like I might be here a lot. So maybe that's me, and a little bit woo-woo, but sometimes I feel like when you first start doing something that you might be in for a while, you kind of get that like, this is the thing vibe.
I was thinking about, because I went 6 months after my dad died, I went and wrote the songs for an album, and I was thinking a lot about, it did
in a
not
Southwest desert town.
in a Southwest desert town.
I love that album. That's gorgeous.
Thank you. It did not become a hit record, but it was like I remember in the writing of it, it was the first time that I had ever gone to write that I was like, I don't give a shit if anyone likes this. I don't care. Like, it was just like, it felt like sort of my first egoless writing. Like, I just went and did this thing, and it's my favorite art I've ever made, because I think after my dad died, everything seemed so insignificant in life in so many ways. And I was like, I need to go and write and have this time and not care what anyone thinks. And of course, on the way to writing that record, I found out I was pregnant. So I was like dealing with the life and the death and just everything was so raw and it's just in a different place. I don't know if you had that experience of just feeling like I'm in such a, like, it seems like you were living in a different universe. Like,
I think there is something to be said for writing something that you love. Like, because I really wanted to be a professional writer. It's what I'd wanted since I was 3 years old. And so I'd done a lot of making stuff that I thought people might like. Like, I did a lot of being like, this seems like something that might sell, so I'll try writing it, or I'll try pitching it, and I did a lot of writing towards what I thought might find an audience. That was what I did for most of my like early 20s, late teens. It was a lot of like trying to figure out, okay, what would people buy from me? How can I make a living at this? And Night Vale really wasn't that. It was very much just like I wrote the first paragraph of it and it felt good, and so I wrote more. It's not a thing I think could be easily pitched. If I wasn't just making it, if I was trying to go somewhere and be like, here's my idea for a thing, I think Night Vale would be a very difficult thing to pitch. To be like, you pitched it
to us, and we were like, I don't know what you're talking about. But sure.
I mean, I remember pitching it to Jeffrey before I showed it to him. We like went and saw a show in Brooklyn, and And I was like, hey, just, I'll send you like a sample later, but I'm working on this thing that I think. And I remember trying to explain it to him and him being like, yeah, cool. I'll give it a listen. That's why I ended up making the test episode is I'm like, I think the only way to show what I'm trying to get at here is just to make one.
So great.
Especially something that's new and different. That doesn't have easy descriptors you can throw on it that people will get. Can I broaden that conversation one little bit? Because one of my questions has to do with like, you guys call this a love story from two perspectives, but one of the themes that I like that ran through the whole thing is because it's more than just the romantic love story part. There's how it's like 10 years of supporting each other through artistic development and some like really inspiring but difficult decisions that you were individually making and stuff. And one of the things I loved about the book was how different chapters one of you is in support of the other one more, and that how well balanced you guys have been able to cope with all that. I don't know what that question is. More just like
an observation.
Well, and just I'd love to hear y'all's perspective on sort of the give and take of being a partnership of two artists.
I mean, this is not on the artistic side, but it is interesting because I have been the anxious mess for most of our relationship, and she's been the one taking care of me. And then when she got pregnant, she became an anxious mess, and that meant that I couldn't be. Like, we kind of have this not hard and fast rule, but we really try in our relationship that we can't both fall apart at the same time. And so we really try, even like during the pandemic, I'm sure everyone went through these things where it's like some weeks you're doing okay, and then some weeks you just crash. And we really tried hard not to crash on the same week, or at the same time. We kind of have this thing where we just try that one of us is okay at all times, so that the other one, and if the other one starts crashing, that's a sign that the other one has to pull it together and be okay.
Yeah, and then I think this also evolves over the course of a relationship, that there is the natural, this person needs me to show up for them right now, I'm going to show up for them right now. But then there's also the learning how you learn what that looks like in the other person. And then you also learn how to ask for that from the other person. So at first you might not be comfortable saying like, hey, I need you to X, Y, and Z. But hopefully you get to a point in your relationship where you feel very comfortable asking for everything you need from your partner.
What?
Figuring that out, whatever that is. I think that when we ask for what we need from people in our lives, it is usually to great success. And when we ask them to read our minds, it is to great failure. So
I agree.
I loved watching that evolve in the book. I thought that was
I did
was
too.
a really fun element of it.
Yeah, I mean the thing about like Night Vale was a thing I was doing pretty early on, but then, Meg has a lot of experience with arts organization. She'd been producing theater in New York for years before that. And so when it started to grow pretty early on, she started, at first, like unofficially, we just kind of talk through things. And then once we started touring, she became part of that. And then so Night Vale became a thing we worked on together very early on, especially pretty much from the beginning of it being a commercial endeavor rather than just a thing that Jeffrey and I were doing in our spare time. So it is this like, I don't know, it's the family business. It's the thing we've been working on for most of our relationship at this point.
But that is just also the sort of the collaborative nature of the theater scene that we met in. So it was like, if it was, the first show that I'm trying to think, it was the show I was working on in 2010. I needed help with like some sort of set decoration, and Joseph just stepped up and wrote a cool thing, and we ended up using it in the set decoration. And then like when Joseph and Jeffrey did their show together, I did the costumes. Like we just kind of like, it was always like, oh, someone who can do this, great, I'll do it. Like it's just that sort of thing. So it's like that mentality of like, what skills can I bring to this to help my friend make this thing, to help my partner make this thing. So that sort of is just, and then, with the neo-futurist stuff, when Joseph would come to my shows, he'd read my plays, he'd give me notes on the whole show. Like it's one of the great things about living and being in a partnership with an artist that you trust is that you have like a really good support system and sounding board all the time.
Yeah, the trust part.
Yeah.
And caring enough about the other person's work to take your foot off your own gas pedal for a minute and come over there and hold the wheel for them while they have the pedal to the floor on their bit. That you guys seem to have managed that really organically, and that's not always a very easy.
Oh, it hasn't been easy. We had like a big fight today about stuff, business stuff.
Okay, let's hear about that. This is what people came here for.
It's really hard being coworkers in a relationship. Like, that's a thing that's gotten easier, but it hasn't gotten easy. I mean, if it were up to me, basically, we wouldn't talk about it outside of certain times, but it's really hard not to have that come in.
We have rules around that. So the rules are that the rules are when someone says you have to stop talking about this, you have to listen. Sometimes you have to say it more than once. And then also
5 or 6 times.
We just try to keep it to lunch time so that it's not like we don't have an argument at dinner about it. We don't have an argument before bed about it. If we're going to have a work thing, we do it at lunch or before, and not when the other person is doing something else. So not like I can't be like, Joseph, you're working on writing. Let me come downstairs and, bother you about X, Y, and Z. So we try to have some parameters with that.
That's smart.
There's big picture stuff though too, like where are we going to live now? Who is this helping out at the moment, and who is it hindering a little bit at the moment? How we sort that out and stuff like that. And,
yeah.
Those are harder to have like pretty like clear little rules that you can live by or not.
Yeah.
So we're getting towards the end of our time. Do we want to close on a reading maybe?
Or do you want to see if there's any questions from the crowd at all?
There isn't. You can see when there's the Q&A.
Did anyone have any Q&A?
I think they said.
I did not see anything in the chat, but let's invite people.
Okay, we'll do a reading then. If anyone has anything for the Q&A, pop it in while we're reading, and we'll see. We'll try to get to it. Okay, you want to go first?
Oh, sure.
Okay.
So we've been challenging ourselves to read different parts every event, and I chose this one for a reason that'll become apparent. This is from 2015, which is the year. It's the essay where I just kind of talk through our years of touring, because that's the year 2015 is the year we started touring. It is, well, no, 2015 wasn't the year that we started touring. It was the year we had our, because it's 2014. I was like, that's not right. This is from 2014. It is baffling to me to think that when we first started touring, Meg and I had been together only 4 years. More than moving in together, touring is a true strain on a relationship. It has all the stress and discomfort of travel, plus the hazy work-life boundaries and bickering of working together, plus a complete inability to ever be apart from each other, spending all day in a van, then an hour in a hotel room, then all night backstage, then do it all over again the next day. And those first couple of years saw real fights. Still in our mid-20s and having only just started sharing our home, we were putting our relationship through the ultimate stress test. But we didn't think about that at the time. We saw an exciting leap, and before we could think about where it led or how far the fall, our feet were off the ground. I had never really seen the country. Now together we were seeing all of it. In Oklahoma City, we booked the nicest hotel in town because it costs less than a normal hotel anywhere else. A bit of luxury to ease the strain of tour. In Fargo, we looked out at the acres and acres of new houses and shopping centers that fracking had built, and we hesitated to drink the tap water. In Milwaukee, we performed at the Pabst Theater, which has the best backstage in the entire world. It has a free-to-play arcade, a full coffee bar, a fridge with every type of domestic beer, a record player with an extensive collection, a full catering spread, and a TV lounge. It was like hanging out in a cool uncle's basement before the show. Our first time in New Orleans, our venue was a tiny church. They surprised us on the day of the show with the news that they had no amplification system, so we had to rent it ourselves from the local guitar center. Our opening musicians, Danny and Carrie, set everything up for us. The venue had also stopped selling tickets after 100, even though they had capacity for 3 times that. We were not sure why they had done that. Also, they had no backstage. We huddled behind a sheet they had hung over a dark corner, our only illumination a tiny reading light hanging by a string. But we had done it. We had pulled off this difficult day, and we laughed quietly with relief. The show started, and a few minutes into it, there was a strange sound. An awful smell wafted to us from the audience. Then the sound of someone getting up and running off. One of our audience members had puked something truly potent right in the middle of our tiny audience area. Ah well, we finished the show, as we've finished every single show since. For the first couple of tours, we went to the bar after every performance, usually the one in the hotel lobby, or whatever was closest to the hotel lobby. If their kitchen was open, I would order food, something stupid like a pulled pork sandwich. During the first few months of touring, I gained 9 pounds. We stopped going out after every show, and I definitely stopped eating after shows. Now Meg and I only drink on tour Friday, which is whatever day of the tour has a day off the next day. When your job is to be the nighttime entertainment for a crowd of people, it can be easy to slip into the feeling that you too are out for the evening, to drink, to relax, and to party. But it's work, and work is usually better and healthier if you are sober and get enough sleep the night before.
Yay.
I'm going to turn on the oven while you do this.
Joseph's going to turn on the oven. We're making food.
Awesome.
Okay. So I'm going to read from 2017, kind of touching on the subject that we were just talking about of working with your partner. 2017 was a big year for a lot of Americans and the world globally. So we had a pretty big seismic change in our political aspect. We talk about a lot of that stuff. The only context I think you need for this is that I dyed my hair platinum blonde at the beginning of that year. That's all. Okay. Also, we were doing a major home renovation. Great. So when Joseph returned from his book tour, we went back to our house and found it nowhere near ready. After a month of construction, the first floor was mostly plaster dust and ripped up drywall. We made a makeshift kitchen in the basement with a hot plate and a microwave, where I tried my best to make us edible food. After one particularly long day, when I went to make dinner, I could not locate the can opener. I went upstairs to try to find it among our boxes of storage. And when I came back down, I found Joseph using the tip of my prized razor-sharp chef's knife and a hammer to chisel into the can. I lost my damn mind. If you are a cook, you understand why. If you're not a cook, let me try to explain to you why this turned my brain into fresh out of the microwave, molten hot pockets filling. Think of the most valued item that you use every day. Maybe it's your car or your phone or your wedding ring. Now imagine someone using that item and a hammer to chisel into a can of beans. Now imagine you have a hot-blooded Italian temper, have a house full of construction dues for weeks with no end in sight, haven't eaten a fresh vegetable in months. Also, remember that you are never really fighting about the can of beans, but instead fighting about every decision both of you have made to get to this specific moment in time, wherein you are watching your beloved stabbing said beans in the dusty basement of what used to be your comforting home sweet home, but is just a hazardous shack of early morning buzzsaws and way too expensive faucets in unopened boxes on the floor. Got it? Okay, good. I said things I'm not proud of, reader. Dark things. We screamed at each other for a long time. Then he left and went to the local diner alone. I used a screwdriver to get into the can of divorce beans and cried for an hour and a half. Joseph came home with a new can opener, the olive branch of our kitchen renovation breaking point battle royale. The kitchen was eventually finished, although not actually so. I gave up and left a few things unfinished because if the construction crew stayed another moment longer, Joseph was going to leave. And I would have no one to cook for in my Barbie dream kitchen, completed with burner stove, double oven, industrial vent hood, and expensive faucets that don't actually work really all that great. The bleach ruined my fucking hair. A lot of it fell out and it won't grow long anymore. And Joseph hated it. But I kept bleaching it and he kept loving me just the same. It made people who look at me every day look at me again and see that I was capable of transformation, that I still had power over my body. I needed to be seen that way in that moment. I needed to see myself that way, as a person who is afraid but can still author her own change. They say if you can get through a major home renovation, your marriage is strong. They say if you can work with your partner, your marriage is strong. They say if you're attracted to your partner, no matter what they happen to look like, then your marriage is strong. What they're really saying is if you and your partner can adapt to change together, global change, physical change, power dynamic change, then your relationship is strong. Your relationship is strong because it can change without breaking. Our relationship, while continually tested by my temper, his stubbornness, and the shifting world we live in, remains strong. Strength that is fueled by surviving missing can openers, shared offices, apocalypse planning, and even sudden impulse blondness.
Yeah, thank you so much. It looks like we're at the top of the hour. So thanks again to Danny Schmidt and Carrie Elkin, and of course Joseph Fink and Meg Bashwiner for joining us at home with Literati tonight.
Thank you,
to our
guys.
viewers, and make sure to buy the book. In the link is in the chat. Yeah, take care, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Megan.
Bye.